Today, we are going to be talking about how to get your guitar ready to sell and what things you should do to get your guitar ready for that next person. Let's dig in. I'm gonna get through all the actual content relating to the answer for that question, and then I'm gonna dig into why I'm selling this guitar, as this is not a shop guitar, this is actually a personal find. Those of you who watch the channel will have probably seen this guitar before. So let's first talk about how to get this ready to sell. So what I would do to prepare a guitar for sale really depends on the context of how I'm gonna go about selling it. I think whether you're selling it on Reverb, selling something locally on Facebook Marketplace, selling to a shop, selling to a friend, kind of all those have a different level of care I'd put into that sale and a different set of things that I would do. So let's dig into each one of those. If you're selling an instrument to a friend of yours and they already love it the way that it is, mods, whatever, obviously you're probably gonna just sell that guitar. You don't need to go through a ton of stuff to do it. I think putting on a fresh set of strings and doing a quick cleanup would be a nice gesture. I think once you start selling it to somebody you don't know, the level of what I would do to the guitar will kind of change. If you're gonna sell your guitar locally, somewhere like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, where you are going to meet up in person with someone, the things I'd still do would be to clean it up, fresh set of strings, and I'd figure out kind of what's original and not on the guitar. Like for example, on this one, this would have originally had humbucker pickups, not the single coil pickups that are currently in this. So you'll want to describe that it's been modified, or potentially even put back those original parts. I think that for me would depend on, do I want the modified parts that have been installed in that guitar, or do I want the originals? Obviously it's a nice gesture to include the originals if you're selling something that's modified, but it's totally up to you at that point. You're doing an in-person as-is deal. As long as you're describing it accurately and both of you see the item in person, say, hey, I'm happy with this transaction, then that's what matters there. I'd still, of course, do your best to give all the information. If you have original parts that you don't mind giving, that's definitely great. But I think it's a little looser when you do stuff locally, as long as you're being honest and both of you are seeing the item at the same time. You're both walking away happy. That's usually a good situation. Once you're moving into selling your guitar online, places like reverb.com or eBay or the Sweetwater Gear Exchange, I think an extended level of care is gonna go into that. You're not gonna be meeting up with the buyer in person, so your listing is going to have to fully represent that guitar, good and bad. You wanna be as transparent as possible to avoid a return. Shipping guitars back and forth can be costly and annoying. No one wants to deal with a return, whether that's a buyer or a seller. No one wants to sell a guitar, get paid for it, and then 2 weeks later you're having to send a refund and pay shipping both ways because you didn't describe something accurately. And no one wants to buy a guitar online and then wait a week for it to show up, and then it's not as they described, then have to go repack it and send it back. Just a lose-lose situation. It does happen, you know, it's not the end of the world, but we like to avoid that if we can. So at that point, what I would do is really start thinking about reverting that guitar back to stock as much as you can. If it has replacement pickups, put the originals back in and then note that, hey, some solder points have been touched up, as this previously had a separate set of pickups, but it's back to stock configuration. Little stuff such as like strap locks, stuff like that, I think is okay to leave on there as long as you explicitly note that, like, hey, this now has strap locks. I will say, as a shop owner, stuff like that I sometimes don't change because strap lock can sometimes entail a larger hole for the button than the original. Sometimes it's more trouble than it's worth to switch back to the originals. It's working the way that it is. As long as you describe it accurately, there's nothing wrong with that. At this point, you might be asking, why are you talking so much about reverting the guitar back to original? People are always gonna debate, is it better to have a guitar that's original or something that's been tastefully modified? Both are totally valid. Your personal preferences are valid. Generally speaking, people shopping for a guitar are probably most interested in it and its stock configuration. They've chosen that model usually because of that. That doesn't mean that there's not times when there's a guitar that's been modded in a really tasteful way that someone else might be really interested in. That's kind of its own thing. To give a one-size-fits-all answer, I would say original is usually best, but that's up to you. For me, running a shop, I know we've always had the best luck with just putting stuff back to original configuration and then noting any changes that had to be made, such as touching up solder points to get it back to that original configuration. We've had some really cool modded stuff come in over the years. Some stuff sells super quick and someone sees that and goes, I love that the way it is. But more times than not, the more modifications for us has been the longer that it'll take to actually find somebody else who's looking for those mods. Whereas something in its original configuration, usually not too hard to find a buyer for. So when listing online, generally speaking, you just want to be super critical about what's original, what's not on the guitar, where are there flaws, are there any buzzy frets on it, is there blemishes? Like on this guitar, there's plenty of blemishes. There's some things on the side there. There's things right there. This thing is not mint. On the back of the neck, there's things. You can see these ones you can feel when you run your fingers over, but then like this, you can't. So it's nice to know, like, hey, these ones If you run your finger across the back of the neck, you can feel that there's dings here. However, there's other smaller scuffs that you can't feel as much. People sometimes are really interested to know that. I think that's totally valid. I would always try to be overly critical, definitely under promise and over deliver. Like I said, there's nothing worse than dealing with returns. So when you're not meeting up face to face, it's definitely a lot better to just make sure that you've said everything about the guitar that will lead to you hopefully not seeing the guitar again after you sell it. You also want to take great listing photos. Make sure you're somewhere that's well lit. Make sure that there's not like a mess in the background. I think using a solid color or similar background is definitely helpful. Also make sure to picture what case does this come with, any accessories, anything that it doesn't come with. Like if you're selling your instrument without a case, definitely note that. But just photo everything. Photo the electronics if you can, photo every angle of the guitar. Any sort of blemishes, you definitely want to get specific photos for. Any areas worthy of conversation deserve their own dedicated photo. Another nice thing when you're listing online is to list as many specs as you can. A lot of people look for particular weights for guitars, so weighing your guitar can be really helpful. We also always like to measure the nut width, measure at the 12th, measure the thickness of the 1st and the 12th. Obviously, if you're an individual, not a shop, I don't think there's as much expectation for you to get all the way in depth with some of that stuff. But for us, with the volume of guitars that we sell, we definitely see better results when we list all the specs. So everything we list, we hand measure like every dimension that you would want, every spec, all that good stuff. And I think the more info you have, the better. The last option is gonna be, are you selling to a shop or a dealer of some kind? As I think that's kind of in its own world. I'm just gonna go pretty brief on this one because at the end of the day, that is almost like a friend deal where it's just up to you and the person you're dealing with on what their expectation is. I know for us, we'll have a lot of people bring us a guitar and they'll have gone and paid to get it set up and they go like, here, it's set up, it's good to go. And I love that. I appreciate where your heart is at. That's actually very helpful for us buying it, but I will say we're still gonna do our own setup. We're still gonna have to take it apart, check everything on it. So while it's nice to see it set up and that will make any flaws more apparent than a guitar that's not set up and not playable, I don't think you always need to go get a pro setup before you sell the guitar. I think doing something at home with whatever tools you have and just making sure that the guitar is clean with fresh strings, that everything's working so we can see the guitar is all good. I think that that's enough. I know for us, like when we're buying an entire collection of stuff, we're buying like 20 guitars at once, I would say that our expectations get a lot more realistic with like, we don't expect that you're gonna have gone through and cleaned every little thing on every single guitar. We know that we're buying that as a job lot. We know that there's gonna be a lot of work that's gonna go into getting that collection to the condition that we would wanna represent it in. So I think that's worth noting. If you're moving a bunch of stuff at once, as is a lot more acceptable. But when it's one guitar, you definitely can get a little bit more, whether it's from a shop or an individual, if you just put the work into having it like present the way that you'd want to. At the end of the day, once again, just still be as transparent as you can with that dealer or shop on everything about your guitar, from its originality to its condition. All that good stuff is really helpful and makes it a lot easier for someone like us to make a quick decision and get you into the gear or the money that you're looking for. I would say there's kind of a sliding scale here of how much you'll get for your instrument. Obviously, with every one of these different avenues, you're gonna get a bit different price for your gear. Whenever you're selling to a shop or a dealer, you're probably not gonna get as much as you would get selling on your own. And then within your own selling on your own, those different marketplaces will all kind of yield different results. Doing like a friend deal, you might get the least because hopefully you're giving your friend a good deal, but then you also will have almost no hassle. So I think that's a win-win. I know for me, when I'm selling my own personal gear to a friend, I will happily do a way better deal for it. I know there'll be no hassle with it. They'll be happy with the gear they're getting, and it feels good. I don't need to get every single dollar for that. When you're selling locally somewhere like Facebook or Craigslist, you can usually get a little bit more, but you're gonna have to then do a local meetup and kind of deal with everything that comes with that. Moving into selling online, that's where you'll probably get the most for your gear, but you'll also have to do the most work. Definitely need to do your due diligence there to not get a return. But I think if you put the work in there, it can be worth it. And especially if you're really trying to get everything you can out of your gear, that's usually gonna be the best way to go about it. Selling to a friend or a shop, that's gonna be the least hassle, but you also might not get the most. Selling locally on somewhere like Facebook or Craigslist, right in the middle. And then if you wanna maximize what you're doing, selling online is usually the best. Now that we have all that talking out of the way, let's get into why I'm selling this and actually go through the process that I just mentioned of getting this guitar ready to sell. So if you watch the channel, you may have seen this guitar before. This is a Fender American Standard Hardtail Stratocaster from 2000. I've been looking for a hardtail Strat for a really long time for myself, and finally ended up doing a trade with a friend of mine and acquired this. I thought, this is it. I'm gonna play this a ton. Let's make this my Strat. Let's put the parts on it I want. I was able to load some Jimmy Wallace Hot 60 Strat pickups in these single coils. as this did originally come with humbuckers. And I absolutely love how this guitar sounds. It stays in tune great. It does play really, really well. It sounds great. What's not to love? But every guitar is not gonna be the one. And for me, neck profile wise, I don't know. I just wasn't getting along with this as much as some other Strats. So at the end of the day, I can't keep everything. I don't wanna keep every guitar I ever buy or acquire, whatever. I decided that it is time to move this one along, take these pickups out and put them into a Strat that I actually like a little bit more. I think that'll be for the better. I know there's somebody else out there that is looking for a hardtail Strat that does like this neck. I think for me, it just has the more modern radius. I love the American standards, but lately I've just been preferring the more like vintage style Strat necks. And the guitar that I'm gonna be dropping these pickups in has a vintage style neck, so I like that a little better for me right now. This should go to somebody who wants this for what it is. What this originally is a hardtail Strat with 2 Seymour Duncan humbuckers. So we're gonna put those back in. So before we start taking this apart, real quickly, I'm gonna mention the mods that have been done to this guitar. As I said, I replaced the pickups in this. I went ahead and replaced the entire loaded pick guard and put new pots and everything in. So I still have the original double Seymour Duncan loaded guard with its original electronics drop right back in, so that'll be nice and easy. I'll only need to do a couple solder points there, so love that. I also added some drop-on Fender locking tuners, but saved the originals, of course, so that's gonna be easy to drop back on. Since those drop on, there's no evidence that any tuners have been changed, and it doesn't change anything about the guitar that a different set was on at one point. I can just put the originals back on, and that's not something that I have to note when I'm reselling it. With the pickups, obviously I'll note because there's evidence with the solder joints that things have been changed. The other thing is before I got this guitar, it had these strap locks put on it that are black. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of times putting strap buttons on will slightly widen these holes. And so I could take these out, fill, and then re-drill and put original style buttons on. But since we're having to modify the holes here, that would result in changing the guitar, which would be a noted modification. A lot of people do like having strap locks though, and I've never seen that really affect the value of a guitar too much. So I'm actually just gonna leave these on. I don't have the original buttons for this. Anything I put on wouldn't be original anyways. What that will leave us with is a guitar that is mostly original with only the strap buttons being replaced and a few solder points being touched up. We're gonna do the easy part first and put the original tuners back on it. Our original tuners are back on, so now it's time to do the more in-depth thing, which is going to be to swap back to this loaded pick guard. Anytime that you have access to the back of the pots is a good time to give each one of them a quick shot of the oxidant. So before I drop the original guard back in, I'm gonna shoot the oxidant in each one of these pots and twist them around a bit. This will eliminate like any like little crackles or anything like that, as that's just stuff that's gonna happen over time. Nothing wrong with your guitar, it just happens. Now it's time to put the original guard back on, so we are gonna get everything rigged back up. I will say it's worth noting, if you don't know how to solder, maybe you don't need to resolder stuff back into your guitar. I know as a shop, I would definitely rather get a guitar that does not have the factory pickups installed, but has them in the case that we can then solder in rather than a not great job being done on the soldering. Our solder points are all strong. Now I'm going to take the opportunity to take photos of the electronics back here, including especially the parts that I touched up, since that's not entirely factory, and the pickups in a way that the model is easy to see and read. Another nice thing to do is get photos of the routes back here, as somebody may want to put a different set of pickups in that require a different route. This is a great guitar because you could do an HSH, you could do SSS, you could do HH, the world is your oyster there. A lot of Strats are only routed for single coil pickups. Some humbucker Strats like this might only be routed for the 2 humbuckers and not have a routing for the single coil in the middle. Also, there's 2 markings in here. There is a Fender model code. There is also this BO. So we're just gonna wanna take pictures of both of those so we have it. the guitar is complete. It is good to go. It is now, for the most part, in a condition that I would feel is ready to sell. There's actually some more stuff I'm gonna do off camera, which is why I say for the most part. These knobs still need to be cleaned, and there's some other just overall cleaning that I would wanna do before I move this guitar along. Now for me, the first thing I'm gonna do is see if any friends want this. My plan is not initially to sell this on the shop, so I'll see if anybody else wants it. And if they do, then great, and this is good to go in the configuration that's in. But if it's gonna sell on the shop, I'll actually have our tech go through it rather than me and do everything that we would do for any other flash flood guitar and get this up to spec for what we do, as even though this is much better, this is still not up to par with where we would wanna list and represent something. Just to give a few bullet points on like what we would do for flash flood that I haven't done already. There's some little stuff, like I noticed all these screws are kind of oxidized on the top, so we wanna go ahead and try and clean that up as much as possible and get those to maybe not shine again, because that's probably not gonna happen, but see if we can remove oxidation. We might even actually go through and replace some of those screws and then note that. Like I said, definitely wanna clean these knobs up. Would also wanna collect a little bit more in-depth specs than I'm doing here, as that I think is important. And just overall, some more in-depth cleaning that we haven't really done here yet. Yeah, we'd also probably do just a touch of fret work on here as well. Frets actually feel really great on this guitar, which is good, but we would probably go through and just do a really quick fret level here to get this at its best. The biggest thing though is really just making sure that we get all the specs and take this part even further to kind of investigate every single component on here. So now that this guitar is good to go, let's see where these pickups are going. Here we have the guitar that I'm gonna be putting these pickups into. Now, if you've been watching the channel for a really long time, you may have seen this guitar before. This is my personal Strat. This is my #1 Strat, and I jokingly call it the Prince of Africa Strat. There's actually a really wild story of how I acquired this guitar. If you want to see that whole story, you can click somewhere and we'll link that old video. But this came out of Africa and I thought it was a scam the whole time, and it wasn't, and the guitar is here. Now, this is by far my favorite playing Strat. For those curious, it is a Fender Japan ST62. It's crafted in Japan era, but extremely early for the crafted in Japan era. This is probably, you know, mid 90s, 96, I think is where we figured this probably is. Very sick guitar, very well worn in guitar. And as of right now, an all original guitar. I originally didn't want to change that, but the hardtail Strat with the Jimmy Walls pickups just sounded so much better that I said, you know what? This guitar is the one that should have those pickups, and then this will just be like my perfect Strat. Let's modify this guitar that hasn't been modified in 30 years. The modification has been complete. Everything went super smoothly, obviously. No surprise, as this is a pretty straightforward mod. Literally just drop these pickups in. I did swap over to all the original plastics, aside from the switch tip, as that wouldn't fit, but everything else went right on as it should, and I am very happy to now have my favorite pickups in my favorite Strat. I think this is a good mod. I really hope whoever ends up with a hardtail Strat enjoys it. I really like the guitar for what it was, but again, just it didn't end up meshing with me. I will use this for years to come, and hopefully whoever gets the hardtail Strat uses that guitar for years to come. I hope you guys enjoyed hanging out with us today. I hope that you learned something if you are looking to sell your guitar and get your guitar ready for sale. We had a lot of fun doing this one. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, and we will see you in another video soon. Bye. Thumbnail clock. What do we do for that?
Probably both guitars.